Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Happy Monday here on this 17th day of February. Jonathan alongside Nathan Wengler. Inside the Game is what you're watching, and you're doing it on the National Soccer Network. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Roku this fine morning. But we are excited to have you nonetheless. As Mr. Peter comes on in. Good morning, but good morning, everybody. Saying I think means he's cold. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Jimmy Co. Busy weekend here on the National Soccer Network, Mr. Wengler. A lot of MASL games. A very historic MASL game on Friday. Our very own Neil Rule and Dan Stickrat. Led the broadcast of the first ever English exclusive commentary for Chihuahua Savage and the San Diego Sockers.
And that was a fun matchup too, especially in Chihuahua, where they're untouchable. I think they're 10-0 now at home, and they're able to win that game to keep their spot in first place. I think my direct quote on the post was their reign of terror continues, and that's pretty much what the last couple of years have been like for Chihuahua in that building. So that was really nice that they could offer both of that, and I thought Neil did a good job too. I mean, obviously he's a pro, so listening back to that was good. And like I said, Dan's always, it feels like he fits into a broadcast anywhere he goes. If it's anything to do with soccer, I feel like Dan kind of fits like a glove. So he was really solid on that. I love I love him in a suit too. That was really fun to see the get up and the pregame production and all that stuff. So that was really nice. And it was cool to get us a broadcast and an English only option. Not on just any game, but on the game. I mean, if you look at the MASL right now, that might be a championship preview between those two teams. So, yeah, there's a lot of exciting stuff to come. But that was kind of, I guess, an example of where we're transitioning with the whole going from Michigan to national based. We're gonna have productions like that for big professional games. Just like that one. And like I said, the environment in Chihuahua, obviously soccer in Mexico is massive, and I remember going and interviewing for a job position in Laredo once upon a time, which is quite literally, like a stone's toss from Mexico. Like I could have thrown a rock across the river and hit a building. And I remember them telling me, like, not a whole lot of sports get a ton of fans, but whenever there's a soccer game or whenever the U.S. plays Mexico in soccer, like every bar, every restaurant is filled up everywhere. So I imagine Chihuahua is a lot the same with how much they love their MASL and their other stuff too. So it's cool that we can provide that. And like I said, I think that's just another example of the direction we're moving in.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because I was just telling this to Bianca, my wife, just like the other day. I'm like, where we were, right? When we look back at like Throwback Thursday and like where I was back in May of 2021, using iPads and now here we are, 3 years later, and we are the leading a broadcast that's taking place in Mexico and providing, professional commentary, here in Michigan to a national audience. I mean, it's it's really cool, right? That we've been able to do that. And so yeah, it's just really, really cool, and it was exciting to be a part of that broadcast, with Neil and Dan here on Friday. We've got 2 more coming up here in March that we'll do the exact same thing for. So the league was extremely happy with what we were able to pull off on Friday, and I think the biggest struggle that any league has is finding a consistent partner that can deliver consistently. And they were really, really happy with the overall deliverable that we provided here on Friday. So we had an issue last night with audio in one of our games, and I know that I think that like a lot of people within, again, this is our first time dealing with the MASL, and I'm not sure if it is where the disconnect is, right? In the Chihuahua game, we lost signal for like 3 minutes out of Mexico. They had an internet outage in the facility. Which again, you think about this too, Nathan, typically, in arenas around the country, they have, I can't tell you how many redundancies within the arenas. But a lot of these arenas are Very similar to like where the Grand Rapids Griffins play, right? You know,
Mhm.
is that what's that arena called? Is it called Andale Arena?
Van Andel,
Van
but
Andel
yeah,
Arena.
yep.
So Van Andel's obviously is used quite a bit, right? It's used for the Griffins. It's used, I think, for the G League play out of there as well.
Mhm.
It's not like it's a non-used environment, right? A lot of these MASL arenas around the country are kind of like former, arenas where maybe there was a hockey team playing or whatever. So there's not a lot of like priority maybe in the infrastructure for these games, and that means that the broadcast teams are working on unlimited resources for to pull these broadcasts off. So that's probably one of the reasons why there's a struggle. um but we did lose audio yesterday. That was on our fault, actually. I stepped away from the computer, and something happened, and I didn't come back in time. And I think for like 15 minutes there was no audio for one of the games, so that was on me and our team. But anyways, so far it's been a blast here with these MASL games. I know that Jimmy Coe was, I think, watching at least on Friday and Saturday. I believe he was watching. I actually called the game here from my home on Saturday. The weather was a thing. I know you talked about it on one of your broadcasts, at least in the opener, 20 games this weekend, Nathan. But it snowed all weekend here in Michigan. It started snowing late Friday evening into Saturday morning, throughout Saturday, all day, and then on and off yesterday completely, right? So we saw a ton of snow. And we had our Oakland University women's basketball game on Saturday at 2 o'clock. Pink out day, and they're playing a Horizon League matchup. We finished that game, then I had to basically rush home to get ready to do two more games on Saturday night. We had our Oklahoma City game that was taking place at 9 o'clock, and then we had another, I think, an 8 o'clock game for the MASL. I think it was I can't think of the name. I think it was Milwaukee that ended up playing in that game. But anyways, um, I'm sitting here on Saturday night and contemplating whether or not I was even going to commentate on the game, just because I had not tested out our new remote production as far as commentary is concerned. You don't want to do it in the moment. You want to have some time prepping. I'll tell you, I was really impressed with it, Nathan.
Yeah.
It came through really, really well. I mean, I sat here at where I'm sitting right now, and I called the game from my home. And we use something called vMix, which is our production software. Now we're not using that vMix right now, but I can send you a link where you get, again, the full broadcast with what is on our program feed. And I can actually change what I send you. I can send you a variation of things, but we'll typically send you our program feed, and you sit there, and I can actually bring you in for the visual aspect of your camera. I can also, obviously, the audio. I can do however I want to, and it was very good. I was very happy with how that delivered on Saturday, and we made it
Yeah.
work. But it is.
Yeah,
It's
and I've
Go ahead.
yeah, and I've been on that side of it too. I know I've done a couple of games from where I've been, at least at old apartment that I was at. I did a couple of games. I did one. I know I did one in Chicago and a couple of other ones. It's always it'll be interesting to see how that technology develops. But anyways,
Well, it's Monday. First off, it is the 17th of February, and for me, that's a very special day. And the reason why is my daughter, our third, Zoe, was born on February the 17th, 2013. So Zoe is 12 today. And so I want to just give her a shout and say how much we love
happy
you, and I
birthday.
hope she's got a fantastic day. This is the thing, right? Back when they're younger, it's like, no, Daddy, I want a Care Bear, or I want this toy or this thing. No, now she wants makeup and she wants to get her nails done. It's like, where'd it go, right?
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
so that's the annoying part of watching these kids grow up, is they go from wanting the cheap Lego stuffed animal to, I want to go get my nails done. That cost $100. They'll be gone in 2 days. What a waste of money. Um, it's funny, right? I get a haircut because if otherwise I look like the Sasquatch, right? But
Uh-huh.
I have no intention of getting my nails done. and then 5 minutes later, after getting my nails done, they're scratched and you screwed up, and now, we'll talk about a colossal. I should
Yeah.
own a nail salon. That's how much of a. I mean, it's
These
such a
these
waste of money.
don't look at them for too long, but yeah, not.
I know it's
Yeah,
a complimentary thing. I know women love to look good. Maybe even some men like that aspect. I get it. It's just, to me, it's just such a waste, because you put these things on, you pay hundreds of dollars to put these things on your fingers, and then they go bad after a couple. You get them in water, you do the dishes, you whatever, you scratch them, and now you just wasted the
yeah.
$100. So,
Well,
but
it would be closing a cupboard or opening a door for me, and just I'm not a bull in a china shop per se, but I'm also not graceful with things as well. So I don't like having things on my person to where I need to, walk around gingerly or be careful with things that I do. Yeah, I've never gotten a petty or a mani or any of that. Now, I've been told that it's fun. It's a fun experience, but I just, like I said, I don't know. Like, I don't move around life carefully enough in order to have things like that on me, because they will break. But I do remember my parents always saying the older that we get, the more expensive the taste gets. And I don't know if it's just because of, being around or just getting older, you just want different things. But that was always we would not get as many gifts. Because I remember the Christmases when we were young. I mean, it was like a pile of stuff, because everything was somewhat pretty inexpensive. Now, you get to you get to Christmas, at least when we got older into high school and whatnot, and it'd be a handful of things, but it was a handful of expensive things that they had to, shell out a little bit more in order to get. So that's also the kind of the maturation of how the gift giving and receiving goes throughout the years. It just, yeah, it becomes a little bit more as you go.
no question, no doubt about that. Let's do something different here this week, which we haven't done before. We cover MASL, and I actually reached out this morning to a fan base called the MASL Off the Wall. It is a Facebook group of over 10,000 people who obviously love and enjoy the MASL. But what I want to do each week is invite someone from that group or someone in there to come talk to us about what's happening in the MASL specifically. But what I want to do this morning is take a look here at the current standings of the MASL. And we'll start to do this with different leagues throughout the course of a week as part of this show. As you talked about, Nathan, Chihuahua obviously sitting atop the table right now. 14 wins, 3 losses. They've got 40 points. They're 10-0 at home, 4-3 on the road. They actually lost yesterday to San Diego. And if you look at that game for what it was on Friday, I mean, to be fair, Chihuahua just really dominated that game, right? They were very dominant, and they are very dominant at home. They're not saying they struggle on the road, but I mean, when you're 10-0 at home and you're 4-3 on the road, they just don't travel well. And keeping in mind that the playoffs will take place in San Diego, so they will not be at home, even though they should be, quote unquote, a home side. So I'm curious how that
Yeah.
will play out
Yeah.
here
Well,
in the playoffs. But Chihuahua's sitting atop the table. San Diego right behind them. They're 15-12. They've got 33. They're 7 points behind them in that for first place. And then Kansas City Comets are sitting right there at 13-10, and they are 8 points back. Kansas City played last night against St. Louis and won in that game, and they've won 5 in a row. So it's good to see Kansas City actually, and they talk about this in the broadcast about how it's more like a revitalization of this kind of like this. I think it's whatever they call that rivalry, like the I-70, whatever it's called, rivalry. But
mhm.
because Kansas City and St. Louis, I think it was like the 172nd time they've seen each other, something like that, some crazy
Mm.
number. And St. Louis has had their number a lot here recently, but Kansas City comes with a win. Baltimore Blast yesterday, currently sitting in 4th. They are with 30 points. And then Milwaukee Wave, they're sitting there right now in 5th. And you can take a look at the rest of the table. But,
Yeah. The-
this is the MASL here right now.
yeah.
We are.
Yeah. The thing I will say is just look at the home and away splits. And it really doesn't matter like what team you look at, right? Savage 4-3 on the road. San Diego 4-3 on the road. KC 7-0-1 at home, 3-1-1 on the road. I mean, you can even look further down the list, right? Like Empire The Strikers, 5-4 at home, 2-4-1 on the road. Everywhere you look, these teams might have an edge at home. Yeah, 1-8 on the road. Versus 4-3 at home. The reason being is because when you talk about the MASL, when you talk about home field or home turf or home pitch advantage, home advantage, when you play in an indoor soccer league, it makes a world of a difference because the way that building is constructed, and you talked about how a lot of them are, playing in either the old AHL or ECHL arenas or someone else was there before. The way that it's built, because it's all inside, the volume in those places is just rocking. So when you talk about having the home fans behind you, especially in the MASL and in the sport where the energy is so important, and you're playing on a pitch that's a fraction of the size of a regular soccer pitch, home field advantage is huge. So when you talk about the fact that the postseason is going to be in San Diego, I realize that they've kind of been barking up a tree and trying to get past Chihuahua in that first place spot. But it's going to make it a whole lot easier for them when you go into the postseason. You talk about having the second best team in the league hosting the playoffs. And so that's the tough thing when you talk about Chihuahua trying to go back and repeat again, is they're going to have to do this all in a different environment. And I think that they've benefited a lot from what we talked about, that home field advantage. I mean, just look at how many people are there. I mean, that very much resembles what an AHL game would look like at the Griffins in Grand Rapids. It's probably a really, really, really hard building to go play in. And I imagine it's a pretty hostile building in the best of ways, and crowd support and all that other stuff. So a home turf advantage, I think, matters more in the MASL than what a lot of people think it does. I think it means everything in this league because really, when you look at the home and away splits for these teams, it's amazing to see. So for Chihuahua, being at home has been almost a little bit of a cheat code, but it's tough when you go on the road. And I don't think it's travel. I just think it's the road environments. I think it's the road energy. But here's what I'll say about the MASL. In my mind right now, it's a 4-team race. It's those teams at the top. Chihuahua is the deepest team. Scoring the ball, they're the deepest. You heard Dan Stickerat talk about them, after they scored. I forget what goal it was in their last game, but I mean, just their goal differential between them and every other team is amazing. So, if you want to make a comparison, they're like the 16 Warriors. I mean, that they top to bottom, they are the deepest team. Baltimore has a lot of great pieces too. I think Baltimore kind of resembles Chihuahua in that way. But then right behind them, you can't really sleep on KC either. And I talked about Rion Marquez yesterday. He's probably arguably the best player in the MASL right now, scoring the ball, passing the ball. And so they have their headliner. Chihuahua has so many different names. They kind of win by committee. KC has Rion Marquez. So KC has the dude, right? And he has been, in a lot of ways, kind of carrying that team through the thick and thin of this season. So I think 1, 2, 3, and then I forget who's tied with. I think it's the Baltimore Blast that's tied with them in that 4th spot. So that's not to say no one else can come up and really beat one of these two teams. And again, with the whole postseason being hosted in one place, that kind of throws a knuckleball into what all of this is going to look like. But in my mind, JT, right now it's a 4-team race between those top 4. And I think the easy selection is to say that Chihuahua is going to be the one that comes out on top. But like I said, I think KC is dangerous too. When you have the guy in the league, there's a lot of stuff you could do to win games around that one guy, Rion Marquez. Now, can other teams find a way to scheme around him and stop him? That's a different conversation. But every time I cut up highlights, every time I look at this KC team, home or road, he's right in the mix, and he's one of the better ones. So I think it's a 4-team race now in the MASL to figure out who's going to win it.
No, the league right now has Chihuahua's obviously won it 2 years in a row, right? They're looking to do something that even Kansas City could not do this year, which is to win it 3 in a row, right? So to win it 2 in a row is so difficult, but then to do it 3 years in a row, it's so unheard of, right? And obviously in the history of the NFL, it's never happened, right? So I don't know if it's ever happened in the MASL. My guess is probably not because it's so hard to do. But they're looking to three-peat, and so obviously there's going to be some scrutiny in regards to all that this year. So I'm interested to see how the rest of the season plays out, and we're excited to be able to bring it live on NSN. You can watch those games on our platform. 144 of them to be exact this season. I think we're up to almost we're well over halfway now. I think yesterday was like games 88, 89, and 90 on the platform. So we're getting pretty close to the business end of this season here over the next couple of weeks. So we'll keep you rolling there. So expect us every Monday to start to dive into the MASL a bit more. We'll bring more of that content to you here each Monday, looking at the standings, talking about that. Our goal is to bring on guests as well to talk about this because, to be fair, I don't know as much about the MASL as I do other leagues, and I'd like to hear from you, the fans. So if you have an interest in being on this show, all you have to do is go to email Jonathan at the Premier Media GRP.com. I already put information on the MASL Off the Wall Facebook page. I've also put it out to Twitter, so all the information's out there. But that way you can come on and be a part of this podcast each and every Monday and talk about what's happened in the league. We'll dedicate 15 minutes of our show to the MASL each and every Monday here on Inside the Game. On last week, I wanted to get into roster sizes for college, right? We talked about that a little bit. And we wanted to do it on Thursday. And obviously with the how things kind of shaped up last week, we ended up doing some other things last week and talking about referee abuse and all that kind of stuff, which if you haven't seen those shows, I go back and watch those if you can. But with that being said, there are new rules that are going to be taking place here in the 25-26 academic year. What it comes down to is it's limiting women's soccer rosters to 28 players, right? This is a decrease of about 10%. So the roster sizes were averaging between 31 and 32 players on those teams. And now it's at 28. Now, you might say, well, okay, 3 players, that's not a big deal. Well, if you're talking about scholarships, that's a big deal. Right, you're talking about allocated scholarship money for women's soccer players at the collegiate level. Taking away 3 scholarships is a big deal, or 3 roster spots. It means that you can't carry them on your team. Now, I am sure that there will be teams that don't roster players, more walk-on status and things like that. But if you are a college athlete who was on a 32 woman roster here last year, and now you're, the 28 round, you aren't on that team anymore, right? So how does this affect the game? Like how does this affect the game? So a couple things. One is the depth chart, right? If you look at schools like Rochester Christian, they had a roster of 40 players, right? Now, I don't think this affects NAIA schools. I'd have to look and do some more due diligence. But 40 players, why do they do that? Well, because of injuries and because of they have their players probably end up paying probably to be on their programs, to be fair. So if they're paying for it, then and I would imagine there's a lot of scholarships at that level, but they're probably paying to be there. So they use it as a revenue generator for those additional 10 players that otherwise wouldn't be there. But it creates opportunity for players who maybe otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity. But if I look at the Horizon League, look at Division I here locally, you've got Detroit Mercy, Oak University, you've got obviously MAC in Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, which is made up of the MAC as well as Missouri Valley, right, which is those players call home at Western for the men's side. You've also got the Big Ten, right, in Michigan State and Michigan here, right? You've got a number of Division II programs, right? Division III programs here. I think Saginaw Valley's in D2. Grand Valley's out there, I believe, is in D2. Aquinas is in the WAC, right? So, and the NAIA. So all these different programs across Michigan, how does it impact them? And again, I don't think we really will know the full scope of how the roster sizes will impact these players and these schools. But for example, Oak University, again, you're talking about going from 32 players down to 28. That's a 4-player difference. And while those 4 players maybe don't make a huge difference as far as like the depth chart and all that kind of, but it just you want more players practicing with you and training with you to help you make your team better. And I'm afraid that it's gonna hurt the development of your programs when you don't have the players involved in this. And I'm curious your take on this, Nathan, and your thoughts.
Well, it's kind of like in my mind, it's like NIL. I knew someone who actively works as the director of communications for the NCCAA. So that's the National Christian Collegiate Athletic Association, not the NCAA, the NCCAA. And I remember he was down in, I think it was Myrtle Beach. I forget where COSIDA had their big annual meeting. And I remember when it was initially announced that NIL was going to become a thing, that you were going to be able to compensate players for their image and likeness, and there would be opportunities set up for programs to compensate players for playing, and to come up with plans to do that in order to keep them around at their program or recruit them or get them to come to wherever they are. And he was sandwiched at this meeting. He was sandwiched in between two different representatives. One side, on his right side, was Central Michigan, right? So you got everyone's from CMU on his right side. On his left side, he had representatives and people working in the front office at UCLA, right? Two different levels of brands, two different levels of college athletics, right? Two different atmospheres in terms of the amount of money that they have and resources. And so they make this announcement about NIL, and everybody on the UCLA side is going crazy, freaking, yeah, jumping up and around. This is awesome. We're going to, we're going to go out and shop for the best talent possible. And then on the Central Michigan side, they're like, what are we going to do? What how are we even going to compete now? We can't hold up against this. It's in some ways it's kind of affected by all that. I think it's created a domino effect because in soccer, it was 9.9 scholarships that these programs were made available to them, right? So 9 players on a full ride. And then the reason why you have that 0.9 is you kind of sprinkle that 0.9 across the remaining parts of your roster. You give partial scholarships, you do all this other stuff. So now it's open up to it's unlimited, right? Unlimited amount of scholarships. You have your numbers reduced, but you're not limited to that 9.9 anymore. And so people are like, well, great, man, more opportunities, more players to get full. Again, we talked about this on a previous show. You can't just walk up to a tree and take 5 leaves out of it and they all count as dollar bills and now you can go give that to somebody. There are certain programs that can afford more than that 9.9 that they were allotted. There are the Michigans of the world where you might even be able to go and make money because of how big college soccer is on the women's side. Now, on the men's side, I don't know if it really affects very much because I don't know if the culture is quite there. A lot of the best men's players try to go the pro route a lot earlier than a lot of women's players. A lot of guys don't grow up dreaming of playing at the University of Michigan or Oregon or wherever else. Women, it's a little bit different. College soccer is a big atmosphere. So there are going to be certain programs where it's crazy to think some women's college soccer players could make money. If you go play at Michigan and they can afford all of those scholarships, they got no issues with that. You could honestly make some money on your name, image, and likeness. It's probably something that's never been done before. But then you talk about the different programs that you mentioned before. Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, Central Michigan. Who else is a Division I program? And, even Illinois, Wisconsin, whoever you want to expand that out to. I even think about the likes of like Marshall and Vermont, who we saw in the finals for the men's side. I don't know if they're going to be able to do anything because of this rule change. I think they can still only afford the 9.9. So the rule change, all that did was just give bigger programs an opportunity to hand out more of these full rides and kind of poach some of these players maybe away from the smaller programs.
Well,
I'm
not gonna disagree with you, but I do think that. So we talk about this all the time, but going to Oak University in Rochester, Michigan, and the bill that is associated with getting your education there is vastly different than that of going to Michigan, right?
Right. That's why I said that some programs can't afford it.
Well, but I also think it's important to say, like, and I think we should look at, like, so I want to actually, I'm just curious what the average tuition
I mean, Michigan is the biggest athletics budget in the country. So I don't think anybody's matching up against Michigan. If I'm being
No, but
completely
my
honest.
point though is that Michigan, while they are bigger, I don't think Michigan has anywhere near the money for men's and women's soccer to pay players a full ride, which is worth some
I think
50
they
some
do.
$1,000 a year. Now Oakland might be in the mid 20s. And maybe they do because I'm not disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is I don't know if Michigan's women's soccer, with the additional 14 available scholarships that they now have available, can actually afford to give 14 more players. You know what I mean? While they have a very big, robust athletic program, those soccer programs lose money. They're not money makers. The only programs at Michigan that make money are your football and your basketball. And just like it is at most universities around this country, your big time sports will deliver the resources for the rest of your sports. Right. So, like at Oakland, basketball is the leader. So, whatever money basketball brings in, it's sprinkled down to the other programs. Now, I don't know, okay, if you just give away like how much does it actually cost you if you're just giving away free education? Like, is it actually in fact costing your school? Like, I don't know. I'm assuming you still have to allocate those funds, right? I mean, you still have to pay professors to be there and blah blah blah. So I don't. All I'm saying is I actually think for the schools like Oakland, this might actually put them in a more area in an area where they can now be more competitive, right, against the bigger schools, right? I actually feel like this actually helps them more than it hurts them. Now, does it mean that they have the money to pull this off? Again, I don't know how the scholarship process works and how much money a student is actually considered, how much money it costs against the bottom line. Because if, like, for example, if I just give out free ad space as a company to a potential advertiser, it doesn't really cost me anything. I don't know if there's a cost associated per pupil, like in the extent as if it's $54,000 a year for Michigan student to go to school there, is that what it costs an athlete on a full ride? You know what I mean? Like, is that what it costs? So I guess we need to dive into what that even looks like. But with that being said, you're right. You just can't, like, all of a sudden be like, we're gonna, great news, we can offer 14 more scholarships, both men's and women's side. That's another 30 scholarships. Let's go do it. Right. Someone's got to pay for it. Right. And whether that be the school, whether that be donors, whether that be NIL, whether that be whatever it might be, someone's going to have to pay the bill for this. And I actually think it's going to be harder for a school like Michigan if they're $54,000 a year. I actually think that they're not going to want to ante up the money for these players. I just don't see them wanting to do it. I actually think that schools like Oakland might actually be more willing to do it than schools like Michigan. I feel like that might be more. And again, maybe I'm off base here. I know you're kind of chuckling a little bit, but I, I just don't see. The reason why I say it is I was just there a few months ago for a broadcast, for a men's college soccer broadcast for NCAA tournament, like the NCAA first round. I was not impressed.
That's what I say. It's not really men's. I think on the women's side, it has probably more of an impact than the men's side. But no, my whole thing is just the concept of, okay, well, we open it up to unlimited. You have this amount of scholarships that you can hand out now. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it would be worth talking to someone who's within the program to get a better idea of what their thoughts are on this. And I think that would be another great interview or someone to have on the show, because I think they would be able to maybe answer that a little more directly. Now, I don't know if they're going to say what I'm saying, but I just, for some reason, and soccer is a different world. And I've said this before, there are programs in the soccer sphere that are relevant that are not really relevant in a lot of the other big major sports. So it's a different landscape altogether. Into football and basketball are going to break away. I agree with that. Independent governance and ability to make their own money and not share. Sad, but it's the reality. Steve, you're 100% right. You are 100% right. And here's the other thing I'll say. The schools, the basketball and football schools, are sick of having the NCAA as their governing body, because I just don't think they have the same firepower that they used to. because of the amount of money that they generate in those sports. And I heard this about like the whole Michigan cheating scandal, and we don't have to dive into that. But I saw someone say this, and I thought it was a very astute observation. He goes, even if the NCAA did want to bring the hammer down, they can't. They can't, because you're going to take one of the biggest money producers in college athletics, in the biggest conference in college athletics, and you're going to try and bury them. There is now in college athletics, maybe not before, like back during the SMU death penalty days, maybe it wasn't the case. Some of these programs are just simply too big to fail. You can give them a slap on the wrist, you can give them a stern talking to, but when it comes to basketball and football, especially in the Big Ten or the SEC, there is so much money floating around that they are going to break away. That is, in my mind, that's not something that, it might happen. It's going to happen. And so I agree with Steve 100%. Now, how that affects soccer is a different conversation. And I don't know what the trickle down effect looks like, but here's what I'll say. Again, just from an outside and overall perspective, I just find it hard to believe that some of these smaller programs in Illinois and Wisconsin and Minnesota, anywhere else across the country, is going to look at, we have more than that 9.9 that we've been budgeting for years, by the way. They've always budgeted for this. They knew, right? Now it's opened up, unlimited. I don't know how many of them are going to be like, I'm excited to go toe for toe with these Big Ten teams and try to hand out full-time scholarships. Now I realize it's more expensive to maybe go to these certain places, and that'll certainly change things. Exactly, Nathan. Easy to banish a program like SMU where no one notices but won't touch the blue bloods. That's my point. If you don't think that dirty stuff is going on at every single program in the Big Ten or SEC,
that universities, are you saying that like governing bodies aren't going to want to touch their biggest moneymakers? Yeah, of course. I mean, they're the cash cows, right? I mean, University of Michigan.
Oh, they want to. They can't. They want to.
Well, I don't know. To be fair, I don't know if they want to. Like, I don't know. I don't know if they want to. I mean, let's be honest here. Nobody wants to do anything when it comes
with
to
the big programs.
Huh?
I think they've done all of this stuff to spite the NCAA.
Oh,
I think a lot of it's a middle finger to the NCAA.
And here's the thing, right? I mean, let's be honest, right? We just saw this a few months back with the Detroit Lions player who was driving down the road, got pulled over. They found a gun in the vehicle, and they kind of brushed it off, and off it went. And the next thing you know, some nosy reporter decided to start to dig into it, and then it becomes a thing, right? The Detroit police were like, it wasn't a big deal to us. You know, it wasn't, whatever the situation was, they were like, let's just go ahead and move on. But then the press started to dig into it. And then the next thing you know, there's an investigation, blah, blah, blah. Again, we can argue about the parameters of why someone would do this versus the other. I always look at this, and there's always something in it for somebody, right? There's always something in it for somebody. So at the end of the day, what is it? So good press, bad press a lot of times is better than good press, right? We've talked about that before, right? And so the NCAA, if they want to stay relevant, they can, we're investigating. And then behind closed doors, we're just sitting there eating popcorn. We're just, whatever. We're not really investigating, whatever. And they make a big spectacle out of this. And then they slap down some, whatever you want to call it, wrist slaps, and say, you shouldn't have done that. Don't do it again. Blah, blah, blah. It's like, again,
people hate that there's a lack of control. And I don't listen, I agree. It's frustrating, Michigan shared our signs with Ohio State and we lost 42-7. I would be frustrated too. But work meeting. Sorry, Jimmy. Well, welcome in, man. You missed a lot. You might want to rewind.
Well, he actually said he's leaving, but
he's leaving. Oh, okay. All right.
I think for us to, and obviously this is kind of getting us away from the conversation about rosters and obviously governing bodies. And it's a great point, Steve. And I think it's something that obviously, when it comes to the bigger sports, I have yet to meet a league or governing body that in its totality is actually really good for the sport in question. Okay. Because at the end of the day, that business, nonprofit or otherwise, is about bringing in money and trying to find a way to govern a whole bunch of people. And it's hard to do. and it's hard to do consistently. Again, I have yet to see a single organization in the history of mankind that has been able to hold their staff or their employees, their teams to a standard that
Mhm.
can be, again. But I also look at the same parent as I'm a parent, right? And I have 3 different kids, and they have 3 different ways of doing things. They have 3 personalities. They have all of these different things. So when you think about that and how to manage my children, it's the same thing as trying to manage these different leagues. I mean, let's USL Championship, right? Again, we talk about USL Championship. Detroit City FC is one of the most respected and best fan bases probably in that league, right? Look at what happened with Nisa. They were in Nisa. They decided to leave Nisa, right? They are like, screw it, whatever, right? Nisa, again, we talk about how maybe mismanaged and poor that organization might be in regards to how it handles its teams. They are like the golden child of that league, right? I can almost guarantee you that they're going to be given a number 1 look at being in that USL Division 1. I don't think there's any question that's going to be a thing. Right? You look at these teams across the country. Look at this. Okay, Green Bay Packers, right? Dallas Cowboys in the NFL. Those programs, those teams are like the money makers for the NFL, more so than a lot of other teams, possibly because of their history, because of what they do. Michigan, Ohio, and I want to put Ohio State. But Ohio State's another one of those schools, right? You got what do you call it? Alabama, right? Clemson, right? You got these programs across the country that are untouchable. They're untouchable. And if anyone out there thinks that there are things that are untouchable, then you live in a dream world, because you live in a
It's not
dream world
reality.
because there are people
Yeah.
out there, there are organizations that are untouchable. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, that's the world that we live in, whether you like it or not. I mean, if a organization is basing all their stuff on how much money a team brings to them or how much money a university brings to them, and all of a sudden you're going to like shut them down and revenue is going to stop, why would
Mhm.
you do that? No, you're going to
Yep.
say, okay, don't do that again.
Right.
Don't
Yep.
do that again.
Yep.
Very bad, very bad.
Yeah.
Don't do that again, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, and the reason why Seinfeld, I remember the episode where in Seinfeld, I forgot the exact episode, but Jerry walks into an establishment where a gentleman created a Pakistan specific restaurant, and it didn't work out well. And it was based on Jerry's advice, and he goes to him with his finger, just like this, waving. He goes, "Very bad, very bad," and I just very bad, man. And I that scene is in my brain right now. I'm thinking about like these universities just going across and just going, "No, bad, bad, you're bad," but it's all we're gonna do about it is bad. It's like, so please don't cancel me because I did that, because it came out of a Jerry Seinfeld episode on TBS. But but yeah,
But
it's like, you can't. What do you expect?
yeah.
And I think Steve makes a great point. You're not going to go after the number 1 moneymaker in your, and again, if they decide to pull away from the NCAA, which obviously if you get enough team, you have to do it as a group, right? You just can't tomorrow be like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, Michigan's gonna pull out, and then nope, you need like more than half of the organized teams in the country to do this. And if they're willing to do it, they have to be able to self-support themselves. That's another thing. We can talk about them pulling away all day long, Nathan. But then someone's got to manage it. Someone's got to deal with it. I mean, it is a headache, and it might not be worth the headache.
Just talking about the progression that direction. But the other thing I'll say is it's kind of on the governing body. You wanted to make this the Wild West. They used to have a stranglehold on programs. I mean, every single year there was a new investigation into something else that was going on within an SEC program about this guy got paid or this guy had a bag of money. It was every single year. They were like wardens. And then they wanted to open things up. They wanted to introduce NIL. They wanted to introduce transfer portal. And then the big budget programs in the country went, oh, okay. So all this stuff that was dirty and illegal before, you're going to give me with this massive budget. You're going to give me free reign to be able to do what I want with it. They kind of created this themselves. So I also don't have a whole lot of sympathy on the NCAA because they kind of did this to themselves. But again, getting back to the soccer side of the conversation, I like I said, would be a really interesting conversation to maybe talk to someone on the inside and see what their perspective is. Cause I just think it's tough to think because it's not going to affect every program the same. And even if you just do and I was watching a couple of videos on it and just to see what other people thought about it before we chatted about it last week. I know we didn't get to it until this week, but when you just look it up, the first thing that comes up is they want you to think, the NCAA at least wants you to think, well, more opportunities, more for everyone everywhere. It's like, I don't necessarily know if that's the case. If anything, I think there might be at some points, if you're one of those that's not getting a full ride scholarship and you're just trying to get into college to play, there might be less opportunities. You might have to go D2 or D3 or go to, a Rochester Christian or an NAIA program because there's just not going to be as many opportunities in the Division I sphere maybe as there was before. I don't think it affects the amount of scholars. I know you mentioned the NAIA earlier. I don't think it affects them simply because they're a different governing body than the NCAA. So I think that the decisions and there's a lot of weird stuff in the NAIA that's different than the NCAA. So I don't know how it affects them, but
again.
yeah.
Oh, here we go. My name is Babu. Welcome to my restaurant. Here's a steaming hot towel for your pleasure. Yes. But okay, so I think you're right. I think do I think that the NAIA is going to create something probably similar on some level? I bet that they do, and the reason why is because again, a lot of these organizations they take their cues and they take their from the NCAA. So I don't dispute that that's going to be a thing. Now, will it be to the same extent? Probably not. But they do tend to kind of follow suit in a lot of different ways. I do think that we live in 2025 and access technology, access to all these different things. There are so many opportunities for teams to be evaluating how they do things in real time and not real time. And the biggest issue that right now that I have with governing bodies is that they put a lot of mandates on teams, a lot of requirements on teams that ultimately hinder their ability to grow as an organization, right? Or to grow or to compete, right? Think of it this way, right? Every university has some form of a technological component that they use to help manage their teams, manage their players. There's video components, there's AI components, there's wearable components, right? Where you're wearing heart monitors or just different things that track where you're going and what you're doing. There are so many different things. And I know that I actually think that the universities as a whole should be left to do whatever they feel they can do in order to be successful. I also think that they should just basically unlock all the lockables and let them go out there in the world and just compete. You know what I mean? And what that means is that, hey, if a coach wants to talk to his person in the press box, like in football, why can't a coach do that in soccer? Like, why can't a coach be up in the press box looking at the formation, and now coaches down below on the field level are like, hey, let's do this in real time. I mean, like, I'm not saying players should be wearing a player out there should have like an earpiece in. I'm just saying why can't we have a coach up in the press box who legitimately is there watching the game from that vantage point and saying, hey, let's make this adjustment. Let's do this. Let's do that. Why can't that take place? It's not happening now. At least I don't believe it is. I mean, we have access to video. Why can't we have video review? But why can't the coach be there with a monitor next to him, looking at the feed? What my question is why is that a problem? Why can't we do that? Why are we why not? I mean, at the end of the day, we want the game to be better. So introducing this tech into the game so that we can in real time make adjustments, isn't that what's better for the sport anyways though? I mean, isn't it? I feel like, okay, we have these roster changes, and the reason they're doing this and they're opening up to unlimited is because they wanted every university to have a chance to be more competitive. Right? Because again, 14 scholarships at Michigan is vastly different than 14 scholarships at Oakland University. Vastly different. And there are a lot of players who are like that 15th, 16th, 15 through 28, who you weren't offering scholarships to before because you couldn't. Well, they're the ones those fringe players, right? They're the fringe players. A fringe player at Oakland's different than a fringe player at Michigan. The fringe player at Michigan is going to, another university would think in Division II. But now that fringe player who wants more minutes, who wants the opportunity to compete at the highest levels in their sport, who wouldn't make the roster at Michigan, are now going to go, oh, shoot, I can go play at Oakland on a full ride now. I can go play at Eastern on a full ride. And that is the difference. That's what's going to make this thing make it better. Because again, I'm sorry, but 1 through 13 on your roster, right? 1 through 14, those are your top players. Those are the players who rightfully so deserve a full ride, and they're the ones who ultimately will you'll probably get most of your minutes out of. But 15 through 28 are not. So now, and those players are typically the ones that will transfer out quickly, going someplace else to give themselves a chance to be seen. So they'll transfer out to another university. And now they can transfer out to get a full ride. That is the benefit to this roster change, is that fringe player. Not, again, if you're the best player on your team, this is not, you already got your full ride. You're always going to have a full ride. Obviously the best player on Oakland is different than the best player at Maryland, right? Or, what do you call it? Maybe like USC or UCLA, like that. Obviously there's differences in that, but that player who's now number 15 at Michigan or Michigan State or Maryland is now a 1, right, on Oakland. And now that 15th player has a fighting chance to get that same scholarship that number 1 player got. That makes a big difference. That changes a lot of things. And I'm interested to see how this will play out here in the coming weeks and months as 2025-26 season gets underway here in the fall. But it's going to change things for sure.
The other thing I'll mention is it'll give you an opportunity to actually earn a scholarship as well. And we see this in a lot of different sports. They have the meeting and they're in the film room, and then a couple of people walk in and they're like, hey, congratulations, your scholarship now. You're no longer a part of this group. We got you taken care of because you've been showing yourself, improving yourself. When you had schools only budgeting for this certain amount of scholarships, you didn't really have that wiggle room. And that's the other thing I'll talk about, individual athletes, soccer players who want to play at the college level. There is just more opportunities now for you to make money and be able to go to school for far cheaper than there was before they opened up this rule. Now, the schools themselves, the budgeting, that's a different question. That's, probably a conversation I'm sure we'll be having throughout the course of this week. And if we do have somebody on, but here's what I'll say. For the individual athlete, it changes everything. Because there's more cash, there's more dough out there. And also it depends on how you perform and how you show up, and I'm always a big fan of, if you do a better job, there should be more incentives for you to continue either doing that job or find somewhere else to do a similar job. There should be an area for you to get more out of performing better. And maybe beforehand that wasn't the case. Maybe beforehand you were so locked into that 9.9 that even at JT, if outside of that 14, let's just say you had someone who really started to turn the corner and play better, it didn't matter. You didn't have the money to be able to open up a scholarship and be like, hey, you're a scholarship player now. You're with us. You didn't have that chance. Right. So if they got good enough, maybe they would hop in the transfer portal and go try and find somewhere else that they could honestly make some scholarship money on. So that's the incentive piece that universities, coaching staffs, teams have now. Like, if you play better, if we have the financial means, and again, if the numbers make sense, we're going to be able to keep you around this program. You don't have to hop on the train, the first train out of town, and go find a different opportunity. So that's the middle ground that I'll meet you on here. There is where you are now. Again, so long as the numbers make sense, as an individual athlete, as an individual player, again, men's, women's side, regardless, if you go from that number 50, the 15th option to all of a sudden now you're top 10, all of a sudden now you're one of the best players. And again, we don't see this all the time, but there are diamond in the rough players all over the place. Schools find them all over. They're under recruited or undersized or whatever it is, and then they start proving themselves. Now you have the chance to, okay, there is tangible money, something to be made, to be taken away from me doing better and developing more as a player within this program and not somewhere else in the country. So the more opportunities are definitely there. I will agree to that part. So for the individual athlete, that gets me excited.
No, it's very well put. And but again, if I'm just curious people's thoughts on this roster change. I know obviously it has I think a greater impact obviously in the women's game than it does the men's game, but nonetheless, it still has an impact in the game of soccer at the collegiate level. But we appreciate you tuning in nonetheless. And again, get involved in the comments here. They're doing our live show. Go on our NSN Facebook or YouTube or Twitter or wherever you want or find us on any one of our social media platforms and give us your input on what you think about these roster changes, as well as anything else related to soccer here around the country. Here on the National Soccer Network. That is basically a wrap. Tomorrow, Nathan, is episode number 30 for us.
Big number 30.
30, man. We're moving along. Obviously, we've started this thing back on January the 6th. And yeah, we've had 2 dates we didn't make it. And there will be some dates in April that I can't make. I can tell you right now. I'm going to San Diego for a couple of days, and I will not be available. So I'm letting you know right now, not going to be available.
Right
now. I'm gonna go do some hanging out on the beach and just chilling. So in San Diego, I know.
Not too bad, man.
With that being said, that is a wrap on today's show. We are happy that you are watching wherever you're watching, near and far. Again, if you'd like to be a guest on this show to talk about what it is that we are talking about here related to soccer or any sport for that matter, again, you can email me at jonathan@thepremiermediagrp.com. I should actually probably put that on the screen, shouldn't I? What do you think?
That'd be
email,
helpful.
Huh? I know, right? Well, I just thought
about
a
radio ad and they read off the number and you're like, oh God, what was the number again?
Well, I wish there's a way to like
EAM.
Huh?
No, I'm just talking to myself over here. But yeah, that's I agree. I think we just want to get more people on, which I think is really important. It's going to help bring our show to life too. I think people have an opinion on what's going on and what they want to go on. So yeah, hit them up, email them if you want a chance to get in on the convo. And I know we got a lot of people that comment on every passing show, and it's interesting because when you go back and look at our previous shows, typically the views start to tick up after a couple of days. So I know that there are people watching this right now and maybe watching the end of this that aren't actually watching it live. You realize we're talking to you guys too. So if you're entertained by just watching, JT and I go back and forth for an hour every morning, then that's fine. Just keep watching. But I know some of you want to get your ugly mugs on here, so do it. Jonathan,
and if you're worried about how hard it might be or whatever, it's not hard at all. I mean, to be fair, we send you a link and you can hop right on in. So it's pretty cool.
Hopping into a meeting,
hopping into a Zoom, but with different technology. So
don't say any naughty.
I promise you, nothing crazy at all. It's fairly simple. But like I said, that'll do it for us here on this Monday morning. We appreciate you stopping by, being a part of this. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Like us and share this with your friends and family. We'll be back here tomorrow morning, same time, same place, right here on the National Soccer Network. I'm not quite sure what we're going to talk about tomorrow. I need to review that, but we'll let you know on our social media here later today what we plan on talking about this week. I do want to start putting that out to everybody, what we plan on doing and how we plan on doing it. So we will start that process here later today. But again, that will do it for us here today. Have a great rest of your Monday, and we'll see you tomorrow, same time, same place, right here on Inside the Game. I just realized that I still have taco.
We got 20 seconds left. Oh boy,
I just realized that I had the wrong outro video that was set up, and I need to put the right one in. So we should probably it's not even here. Copy. Where'd it go? It's like gone, dude. It's like gone. Wow. Well, whatever. We'll use this one for now. Anyways, well, there you go. I'm talking this in real time. I'm